Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session on the circular economy for tourism. My name is Stefan Ott. I work with the World Bank on circular economy issues, and in this case, I want to tell you something about circular economy in the context of small island development states, and with a zoom in on tourism operators and how tourism can maybe contribute to scale up circular economy solutions, and we can take away the benefit for the tourism providers as well as the tourists that come to see a destination. It's glad to have you all here today, and I was advised to speak a bit slower, so I will do that from the next slide onwards. What we want to talk about today is a little bit on the why of circular economy and tourism operators, or tourism in general. Why is this important, and why do we have put together a program on this as the World Bank, and also just very basically on what the circular economy even is, so that you get a little bit better idea on what we can do in terms of circular solutions. And at the end of the presentation, I just want to go a little bit into details of how what can be implemented and how it can be implemented, and what some of the solutions are that are out there that might also be interesting for the West Africa Ecotourism Network. Yeah, and I'm glad to be able to bring that a bit closer to you today. So I will start in this case with the what, because for those who have not heard about circular economy before, it might be useful to go a little bit into the details of what it is. And before I get into the concept itself, maybe a bit of the objectives of what we wanted to achieve with this project is, on the one hand side, circular economy is a kind of a mega trend, one of the big trends that will form and shape the economy of the 21st century. And I think the tourism sector, and especially single-use plastics within the tourism sector, have crystallized as one of the most pressing topics in tourism. So that's where we put an extra focus on. And to understand challenges and opportunities, we have done quantitative assessment of waste, water, energy, and general resource consumption in the tourism, but also in a small island development context. This was the core of this study, to look deeper into small island, the specific challenges and opportunities that small island development states face, who are often very much dependent on tourism. So everything is really concentrated there, and this is why we have put a closer look on small island development states. And you will see that this goes throughout the presentation now as a focus area. I will also briefly talk about the shortlisting that we've done, but more importantly, this is part of the dissemination of the project. So we want you to see some of the ideas that have come up during the project. So what is the circular economy? When we talk about the circular economy is an economic concept. So redesigning the business practices that exist and replacing it with newer business models and with more innovative business models that are not always based on the linear economy. The linear economy is based on this discarding model, where we discard waste at the end of the product use time, and we often also don't really pay much attention how long we use a product, although the production of such a product might be very energy intensive, might be very harmful to the environment. But the circular economy as an economic approach looks for business models that can innovate the current way of doing of business as usual, and we are trying to find new opportunities by not creating any waste. So preventing waste is at the very top of the circular economy, and at the same time creating new business models, new jobs around these new business models that can create economic value without harming the planet as much and without wasting resources the way that a lot of other business models are doing. And that becomes very, very relevant in areas where the general consumption of resources is higher than elsewhere, which is the case for the tourism sector, for example. We can also not recycle our way out of this problem, and how this problem looks like specifically on some of the islands I'll mention in a second. Because recycling is not the end solution to really having a long-term solution for most of these issues, especially in a context where maybe the access is not there, maybe we don't even have the materials yet, or we don't have the scale to recycle. So it might make more sense to just innovate the throwing out the material at the end of its life away. And just to give a short overview on like what are we talking about when we talk about circular economy, it's mostly the R framework, so the remanufacture, recover, reduce, repair, reuse, and only at the very end comes recycling. So the idea is to really keep products in use, prevent waste and pollution in the first place by other ways of providing a service, for providing a product, for example, through a service. And these levels, especially from a policy point of view, can come from many different levels. This can start at a company level. We can agglomerate an industrial park, but it can go up to national strategies on circular economy with the key goal to create economic growth, social progress, and environmental innovation. So why do we need a circular economy? Why is this relevant for tourism? In this case, we have a lot of challenges, especially when we look at small island development states. And I want to mention that this was the focus for this study that we've done. The focus of small islands very much limits the space that is available to have economic activity. And as previously mentioned, it's mostly tourism that is kind of the most likely activity on such islands, because often they have unique natural capital assets. So very beautiful beaches that people would like to see. And this is also very often an important contributor to the local economy. At the same time, pollution through increasing consumption is usually increasing with increasing economic growth. Pollution has negative side effects, not only to the local population, but also to the way that a part of the business on such islands is made. So it's undermining the competitiveness of the tourism sector on such islands. And at the same time, there are a lot of other risks that these islands encounter. So if the islands don't manage to have long-term employment and interesting, attractive employment on the island available, people will leave. And at the same time, climate change poses substantial risks to most of the islands because of changing water balances or water resource availabilities. But in general, just life quality on the islands that especially on some, could degrade over time through climate change. And there's also, once we go a little bit away from this kind of relatively pessimistic view, it's interesting to look at what are the opportunities that can come out of such islands. Because what is very interesting about islands is they're very concentrated in one space with not a lot of flexibility in terms of what can be done. So one of the most rational steps is towards looking at tourism and how tourism can be improved. And I'm sure there are a few lessons that can be learned also by non-islands by upgrading the tourism sector towards a more ecotourism, to more ecotourism activity, or making the tourism sector as a whole more sustainable and more circular. To give a short feeling on what the current situation is, and this is very on islands and especially in small countries where there's not a lot of space, very evident already that the consumption as it is now and is often fueled by tourism, this is something that has come out of this study, is very detrimental to the natural capital asset of the place where these activities are carried out, the tourism activities or the consumption in general. So the current system leaves behind these landfills or dump sites, as we can see them in the picture. And this really is something that also affects the broader local population, as well as other bodies such as the groundwater body and the general wildlife that is on the island, being birds, etc. And this is a very common picture that we can see across many countries, and increasingly there's a movement and there's momentum to do something against this and to find more systemic solutions to these problems. So how can the circular economy help in this? Well, if you look at the tourism value chain, we have a lot of different activities that are happening along the tourism value chain. And on the one hand side, people have to be transported to a specific place. They have to be transported from A to B. They need to sleep somewhere. There are restaurants, there are other entities like cafes and bars that are offering their products to tourists. There's retail for either local crafts, but also groceries or activities. And then there are the destination tourism assets, such as the natural assets that the island or destination has. And tour operators and other support services such as water, electricity, which especially in a lot of the small island development states are a big issue, as they are often under a lot of pressure from tourism. And this is exactly what we want to focus on. So if we take out the things that are not under the direct action of the tourism operator or the entity that regulates tourism in a country, we're left with a few less activities. There's, of course, transport would be another topic, but what we really want to focus on is the energy, water, and waste aspects that are at the core of circular economy. And there are a lot of opportunities. If you, for example, look at accommodation, it's usually a high energy and water demand activity where we have a lot of waste generated in one spot. There's a potential to maybe do something, separate at source, but also trying to just improve the practices as they are today. They're good practices internationally that could be looked at. And this is what this study actually did. And the same applies for food and beverage service provision. So, for example, when we talk about plastic alternatives, what are the alternatives? And we will look into this a little bit more into detail also in a moment. But in general, these are the intervention points where we can get together and really think about what are the leverage that we need, what are the incentives that we need to change not only behavior of the tourists themselves for them to support such systems, but what can we provide as tourism operators or as a tourism authority in these different activities in order to foster not only more sustainable businesses, but also a general more sustainable destination as a whole. And the main outcomes of this study is that we have defined the priority intervention areas or intervention areas in general where the private sector can get active and the public sector can get active. On the private sector side, the hard investments, if you look at basically what can be solved with financial investments, it's mostly the retrofitting of existing tourism establishments. So thinking about how can we integrate renewable energy into tourism entities, how can we look at water efficiency and or generally energy efficiency measures as well. Is there an opportunity for increased water management if the municipality does not fulfill this, and it could be detrimental to the local tourists that are, for example, at the in a specific hotel, so that the water quality overall gets increased. And how can we substitute or replace harmful plastics that we see in our seas every day, basically? There are a few other things such as composting, which is relatively simple and can be done by almost every bigger hotel, so to say, or in conversation, collaboration with others that also have the same problem of not knowing where to put this material, to compost it and basically produce a new resource. This can also be done externalized through individuals or local companies, but these are opportunities that are out there. And in a market sizing that this study has conducted, we have identified the biggest market for solar PV and associated battery storage, as on a lot of the islands that we've looked at, the islands where, I'm not sure if I have mentioned this already, Cabo Verde, Sao Tome Principe, and the Gambia is not an island, but still a relatively small surface country. And this was the main cost saver, because a lot of these hotels or accommodation providers at current use generators, which consume fossil fuel, they're not only generating emissions, but also at the same time produce cost more money to operate than, for example, the sun that is just shining. Of course, one of the most important and key enablers for this is the willingness to invest in circular solutions. And we have seen that in Cabo Verde and STP, for example, there is potential and also a certain willingness to invest in circular economy opportunities. We will go now a little bit deeper into the single-use plastics. What can be done on a company level to reduce, avoid, reduce, or as a last step, recycle instead of landfilling or just littering plastics? On an accommodation provider basis, it's relatively simple, refilling instead of always providing single-use items. And we can see that in Cabo Verde, already 32% use reusable or refillable toiletries, and in Sao Tome it's even 58%. And this can go as far as reusable water bottles, providing these 19-liter containers, and just really integrating the thought of how can we prevent the waste in the first place into the general, normal, everyday business routine. And there are other opportunities such as producing, such as NGOs that have formed in all 3 countries that we have looked at, to produce non-plastic textile bags instead of plastic bags. So all kinds of opportunities to replace the plastic that is currently used in excess, especially by tourists themselves. So to provide them with an alternative opportunity that is convenient, that is relatively easy to implement. And the priorities for actions that the study has identified are especially on the separation, valorization of the different waste types. This is one of the quick actions that can happen relatively easily without much investment, requiring mostly also collaboration with the local municipality and collaboration collaboration across hotels and tourism providers or accommodation providers in general. And there are also other opportunities that, for example, come from the substitution of plastics with glass containers. This is also something that can happen relatively quickly. One important thing that I've mentioned before is the interest from local stakeholders. And to just give a few more numbers to this expression from before, the Cabo Verde example shows that there is interest from tourism businesses to actually, for example, procure alternative plastics, to have a sustainable tourism certification or a standard, and for on-site renewable energy generation. So there is a lot of interest for all these solutions that are out there to actually be adopted by businesses. And the same applies to SUP reduction actions, as I've just mentioned them, or other waste management actions that are very urgent, especially on islands that do not have an existing, or in tourism destinations that do not have an existing waste management system or a functioning waste management system, or no regulated disposal of the material in the end. And what is interesting to see is that the interest in doing any of the mentioned actions in the next 5 years is high throughout the various options that were available. And this is a very important point to actually start moving things, because this, if the private sector is interested, that means also that governments need to provide the necessary enabling environment for such opportunities to be realized. And I think this is already the next and last point, or close to last point that are important to mention, is the collaboration between the public and private entities are very, very important. And existing tourism strategies to date do not fully integrate circular economy as a concept and as a way to think, so to say. And this is something that the public sector can do to support such initiatives. And there are also sustainability standards for tourism that can be developed, and they're already defined, for example, in Cabo Verde and planned in the Gambia and Sao Tome and Principe, to really create a common understanding of what do we mean with making tourism more circular and with making tourism greener, and have a general idea and a framework to measure progress towards we can measure progress against. There is also opportunity for destination-led regenerative tourism model, and the regenerative aspect is very important, because the benefits of a regenerative tourism aspect are mainly based on the connection between maintaining or conserving a natural asset, while at the same time having some kind of revenue from tourism that can, so to say, cross-finance the conservation of the asset, and through that also protected, because through that livelihoods are protected, and the idea is to really have a long-term partnership with nature in this case, to have existing or keep tourism a relevant and sustainable model for economic revenue. One more slide that is looks a little bit complicated, is relatively easy to understand. When governments and when private operators look for opportunities, this could be of help for them to actually have a little bit of an orientation of where to go. And we start at the top when we think of refuse or rethink the way we provide our service to our clients. I think the most important thing when it comes to this is that the way we think influences the way we act in our operations, daily operations, and that can change a lot in the behavior and the education of staff that works in your entity or in your institution. And giving this framework, this is called the 10R framework, or 11R framework even, to have this as an input for ideas. That we also have some around this 10R, 11R framework, 10 or 11, I haven't counted. We also have put some effort to like write down the status quo of where we are and what is needed, and what is needed to also really think or really implement some of these activities that we have said before. And in order to put this in a clearer picture, we have put together the potential building blocks for circular economy in small island development states. And these are all investment opportunities that are probably probably relevant to most small island development states. And that can be implemented. They're sorted by color. This may be a good discussion point. I might want to come back to this slide later on to really see what of these things can we actually make feasible in our own context, in the context of a tourism operator, in the context of an institution to foster certain developments. This is already how I want to close, and I'm looking forward to an interesting discussion.